to give you this bag.
Okay.
There's a reason.
Mhm.
You know me, I like to give public credit, public appreciation, and I thought it's long overdue to give a beautiful note of recognition of my husband, David Yerushalmi, we just recently celebrated our 35th anniversary, going on our 36th, so we've been, thank you Hashem, you know,
Well, Hashem.
having a lifetime of memories. And I was just thinking like how this opportunity is a great opportunity to thank you for all the years of supporting what I do, so giving, you know, not only the financial wherewithal for me to, you know, write, lecture, counsel, and opening our homes constantly to the guests that we have here, and thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You know, because without the other half, it would have been impossible to do anything that has been done in the past few decades.
Without gushing too mushy, it's easy to support the work that you do and the things that you do because it's constant and it's purposeful and it's important. So that makes it it makes my job pretty facile.
Anyway, sorry that it was on mute for a little bit, so I just noticed it was on mute. So you didn't hear my thanks to him and for his appreciation, but luckily it's on Facebook recorded. But if anyone could go back and hear that again, but just a big thank you. You know, I was reading this book, Dear Daughter, and a Father's Wife's Guidance for a Wholesome Human Relationship, and I was so touched by a story, and I started thinking, you know, especially with what's going on in the world and every pressure and stress just generally in life, and then on top of that, the pressure and the stress of, you know, what's happening in the world, that, you know, Baruch Hashem, we can take the time right now and really appreciate the people in our lives. So there was a story of this man, and he was, I guess, giving a ride to a grandmother and a daughter to a funeral, and he's like witnessing an interchange, like, you know, the grandmother was just like talking to the mother as she was trying to get her children, you know, ready and settled so she can go to this funeral, and she's like trying to rush her daughter, and she said that I took care of everything, the children are okay. No, but I have to go to the kitchen, I have to do one more thing. So she goes to the kitchen and she's like, I don't want to miss the funeral, please hurry up, what's so important, everything's done. So she comes out of the kitchen and she goes, and she has a paper bag, and she gives the paper bag, and she says to the person who's driving them, please give this to my husband Moshe when you see him at the funeral. And she's explaining to her mother that I made a small snack for him. So next thing you know, he's like, okay, like, I'm probably not going to see them. There's going to be tons of people. And in his mind, and also in his mother's mind, is like, what are you doing? Giving him a snack? You're going to a funeral? Like, he could survive another hour or so without food. So they were both like kind of baffled. So he actually sees this husband of hers and gives him the bag. And he's opening the bag, and he's like, you know, happy. He gets a bag from his wife, and then he starts crying. And he's like questioning him, why are you crying? You know, like after looking in the bag. And for a second he was like, you know, I felt such a sensation. My wife cares for me. My wife like made the extra effort to bring me this snack. And I started thinking, you know, my Rebbe, who just lost his wife, won't have that experience anymore like he used to. So I was just like, wow, that's what we really need to hear right now with what's going on in the world. Like we have each other, we have whoever we have, and like maybe we can, from everything that's going on in the world, step up and do more in those small acts of showing appreciation.
It's a good lesson, and my wife and I were talking a little bit earlier about.
My phone freezes. We have to go. Whoever's there, if you could mute. That's what I want to do.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so we were talking just a little bit earlier in the day about what we were going to discuss in these marriage dialogues today. And of course, we had started this process and took a hiatus for a number of reasons, and mostly because we had a grandson in the interim, and that's kind of occupied a lot of time of my wife's. And but all of our, at least our son and daughter-in-law and grandson, are in Israel with our other Jewish brethren and sisters who are there suffering the war. And one of the things that we've noticed, and certainly my wife does in her work, is that when there are external stresses to a relationship, a marriage in particular, and it can also be true of parents and children, but mostly husband and wives, external stresses, whether it's COVID and being secluded together for many, many hours a day, if not every day, all week, or whether it's financial, or whether it's chas v'shalom, lo aleinu, a death in the family, or to a close loved one. These kinds of external stressors can affect a relationship where there might be weaknesses, where there might be insecurities, where there might be doubts. And the external stressors just put more pressure on those fault lines and can create cracks in a relationship. I'd like to be able to come back to the issue of the family, but obviously all of Am Yisrael right now is suffering from a big stressor. And that, of course, is the attack by Hamas, Yamach Shemam, and the war now that's gone into a new phase where we have Jewish soldiers having entered into Gaza with Suat Aza, and are now getting close to what will be door-to-door combat, urban combat, which is extremely dangerous. And so we hope and pray they all come back whole. But I wanted to take a moment because I think that when stressors from outside the relationship affect the relationship, the first thing that one should do is operate in a world of reality. That is to say, don't blow things up out of proportion. Don't imagine things that aren't there. And even though we have a concept in Hasidus, Frag gut wird sein good, think good and it will be good, and always being positive and always being b'simcha, we also have to look at the real world to be able to address the real world. And that's why we saw many times, and I think Jem has put together a really wonderful group of videos. Of course, the outfit that produces videos from the Rebbe. And they put together a wonderful collection. And they're not just sound bites where they can take what the Rebbe says and make it into a message they want to bring over, but they brought the Rebbe in the Rebbe's context, what the Rebbe has said over the years about war in Israel and war generally, and that is when you're engaged in a war with the enemy, and especially in Israel where you're protecting Jewish lives, you have to fight the war completely and entirely and to victory. And if you don't do that, then the enemy simply grows in strength from that weakness. And many, many years ago, when I was involved with a think tank, back in the 1980s, the Institute for Advanced Strategic and Political Studies that was based in Yerushalmi and Washington, D.C., we put together what we then called the Black Book, and I'll show it here. And the title is, Can Israel Survive a Palestinian State? And the theme of this book and the study that was the predicate for the book was we brought together military experts from various political factions in Israel, because generals are not just generals. To be a general in any man's army, whether it's Israel or the United States, you have to be fairly political. So they also have their political ideologies that they embrace. But we asked the military experts, can Israel survive a Palestinian state on its pre-67 borders, which means giving up, God forbid, Yehuda and Shomron and Gaza? And the unequivocal answer from all the military experts was, it would create an existential military threat to Israel, meaning to the Jewish population that's in Israel and to the Medina itself, but more importantly to the Jewish people there. Then at the end of the book, we allowed the generals to wax on politically and to say, well, you should take that risk for peace, or you shouldn't take that risk because the Palestinians are going to fight until the destruction of Israel, or until you kill them, or have them entirely surrender and render them harmless in whatever way you can. And the Rebbe's Maskiras, the secretaries, contacted us and asked for several hundreds, as memory serves me, of these books to pass out, because that was exactly the lesson of the Rebbe. Now, I will concede and admit that this is a divergence, but I think that when we have this very, very substantial stress in our lives right now, we have to understand what we as the Jewish people are up against. If the state of Israel doesn't fight this war the way that Ebbe had insisted they fight in 67, in 73, in 82, during the Lebanon incursion, if they don't fight this in complete victory, then we're simply, God forbid, going to be dealing with this issue and dealing with these kinds of attacks. And if Hamas, which is generally speaking not an existential threat to the state of Israel, but if they can engage in the kind of behavior and destruction and atrocities that they did in 1 day and a half, then this will repeat itself, as the Rebbe points out, if we don't destroy Hamas and as best we can, the support for Hamas. And that goes much wider than Hamas. Now, having said that, I will say this as well. There is no easy solution to the problem. That is to say that Israel can go in and Israel can wipe out all the leadership, wipe out the junior leadership, can even wipe out every single gun-carrying Hamasnik. The problem is, of course, is that at least in Gaza, and it's true to some degree in Yehuda and Shomron, in what is termed the West Bank, where the PLA has control, but it's certainly true in Gaza that you have 75% support on any given day. And it can wax and wane, as all polls and surveys do, but it's certainly a super majority of support for Hamas and Hamas's charter, which is the destruction of Israel from the river to the sea. And that means not just the destruction of Israel, but the Jews in Israel. So if that's the case, and as long as there are the Palestinians from Gaza still there, they will represent a terrorist threat to Israel. They're not going to go away. And when you destroy all their infrastructure and their buildings, and you bomb them, and you're killing the soldiers, you're killing civilians, if you can call them such, you're killing children. This new generation of Gazans are going to grow into the same Hamasniks that we see today. It's not going to go away. So that's a human reality that we have to deal with. Now, that means that the plan, whatever it's going to be, to rid the threat and deal with that threat on an ongoing basis, right? It's a relatively strategically sound thing to go in and destroy the infrastructure and kill all the Hamas leadership and even many of the soldiers. But that next stage, what are you going to do once you've done that, right? As General Colin Powell used to say, if you're going to break it, you better have a plan what you're going to do after you've broken it. And I don't know any better than anyone else what that plan is. I'm not sure Netanyahu and his government have a plan. But what we do know is Israel has to fight this war until it is absolutely victorious. Now, having said that, because this is going to continue to be a stressor, it's not going away. That was the point of my long soliloquy here, and that is that it's not going to go away. We're going to have this stressor for time to come, in the same way that the U.S. was not able to end the threat from Afghanistan, wasn't able to end the threat from Iraq, end the threat from Iran, end the threat from Lebanon when we put Marines there and they were bombed and ultimately had to evacuate. These are going to be transigent problems that we're going to have to deal with. So as stressors, so now I want to give it back to my wife and ask her as a counselor who dealt with COVID. I remember watching the number of clients that were flooding through the door, as it were, and she set up this incredible network of counselors and providers who worked with her at her CBTT program, and then provided counseling to hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals who were suffering from all sorts of illnesses that resulted from COVID, emotional illnesses. And I see now as well, she did the same thing. She set up a network and has been working on that to respond to the emotional turmoil that's resulted from this latest war. So what is it that couples can do? I will give you a short answer from me. I think the most important thing that couples do throughout their relationship, but especially when they're stressors, is not to do what I do. Right? My natural instinct when I'm under stress, whether it's work, whatever it may be, I go into my man cave, I close the door, I don't want to be bothered. And, we don't take as many walks. I mean, I haven't been able to take many walks lately because I have a broken foot, but even without that, I tend to, as I think many men do, is go within themselves. And that's a problem. I think what you have to work on is forcing yourself to communicate and to have time. You don't have to sit and schmooze with your wife day in and day out. That's fine if you're capable. I'm not one of those types. But learning with your wife once a week at least. Every day is good, but at least once a week. Anytime you sit down at a meal, my wife is very, very makpida. She's very disciplined about always making certain that we say something in the way of divrei Torah when we're sitting down and eating together. I think those are the kinds of things, whether it's a walk, whether it's learning together, whether it's just being in touch during the day. So I'll see my wife and she says, well, I'm going to start davening. I say, fine, so I'll be learning chitas, or I'm going to start my exercise. So I say, okay, I'll do my exercise too. We don't exercise together, but at least I know she's doing her exercise, I'm doing mine. So we have that connection. Because I think what happens to couples is that what we do know that people grow, people change, right? Aging is all about growth and change. And well, at least we would hope it's growth, right? It's certainly change. And we hope that we grow as we change and as we grow older, that we grow as individuals and as soulful, thoughtful people. But it's easy, I think, that a woman is going off in her direction and changing and growing in her way, and the man's growing and changing in his way. And then before you know it, especially with external stressors, all of a sudden they don't have as much in common. Or God forbid, they don't have anything really in common. They've become different people living just separate lives under the same roof. So other than my kind of Reader's Digest, what you can do, learn together, walk, say Divrei Torah at the table, at least communicate at some level so that you're in touch with that individual and things in their life that's going on. We have date night every week. When I'm not hobbling with a broken foot, we have walks. We learn together when we can, especially on Shabbos. So what can couples do that will allow them to both grow in good times, but also suffer these stressor moments and be able to still not allow that to erode the relationship?
Well, I think it first starts in your mind. They say change your mind, change your life. So there's mindsets that we have to investigate, almost like, using the Torah as a flashlight to see where are our thoughts in this relationship. Where are our thoughts leading to very high, unattainable expectations? Where am I maybe having double standards or expecting way too much for a person that's called a human? Understanding the dynamics of all the stressors and all the realities of the obstacles that can get in the way, and to step back and view the whole picture of the situation that maybe the partner, their soulmate is experiencing, so that many moments can be saved and kept very sacred and very holy. Because when the mind is directing a person in a way of judgment, of lack of understanding or empathy for what the other is going through, and many times, one of the partners are very blocked, and no matter how you say, let's learn, they don't want to learn. Let's do this. They're just blocked, they don't want to, and they're closed. So it can be very difficult to motivate the other to do these things that could be very beneficial for the relationship. So I always say we have to really be at peace with the process of, witnessing the transformation and the maturity of our children, because we get it. Look how small their brain is, and they're not developed physically, so we can't demand too much of them. So we have to understand the human condition of change and becoming more the real self and evolving has a process of sometimes up, sometimes a lot of down, and the patience, as Rabbi Ginsburg says, we have to cultivate infinite patience in what the process of developing the better self looks like.
Okay, so I have a question for you then that has got to be on everyone's mind. And some of this is a kind of a phenomenological response by me, because it's something that I certainly have experienced with you in our early years of our relationship. So what happens if Plony, the husband, for example, is blocked? So the wife comes to Plony, and she says, we really need to learn at least once a week, or let's take a walk. Let's stay in touch with one another as we begin to build and grow our family. Or as we get into our twilight years, as they say, and we're grandparents, and so we don't have all of the day-to-day connections that we used to have to our children in raising them together. So now they're out of the house, or they're in the back house, or wherever they may be, but we're now just, as they say, empty nesters. I don't think there's any Yiddish parents that are empty nesters. No. That doesn't happen. But at least, as it were, formally. But the husband is just, I don't have time. I don't have the wherewithal. I don't have the inclination. I'm fine. You just do your thing. And I'll do my thing. So the wife then has, as you put it, this infinite patience, or as Rabbi Ginsburg apparently put it. And as you've been talking about today, and she's willing to wait out the process, the ups and the downs. But what happens if the husband, because the wife is so infinitely patient, he's just devolving? That is to say, he's on a path of continued seclusion and separation and as it were, not technically a get, but divorce, meaning they're living separate lives, and he's not inclined to circle back around and find the right path. What is the partner, the wife, in my case, a Plonian, let's call her Shlomit, what do they do? What does she do to get him back?
Her partner is God, and her partner is faith, and her partner is trust in the long, short-term, hopefully soon, process of being his cheerleader, of not judging him, of loving him, of respecting him, of being there for him, whether it's the food that she might be making or the smile that she's giving when she's walking through the door. The same way as you have to wait infinitely for the children to get to a place where they're going to be able to mutually be somewhere, in a mature relationship with you. And eventually those seeds that are planted blossom.
Okay, so if
seeds of love, seeds of compassion, seeds of not judging, seeds of not being so needy of the other to make you feel good about yourself, so that you won't be as dejected, you won't be as full of despair, you won't be as broken, because you realize they're in their mode and they have a beat of their own drum, and God will help them with your prayers, with your tzedakah, with making a beautiful Shabbos tish, and you are doing the spiritual warfare of trying to redeem, whether it's your children or your husband, and you believe it will pay off.
Okay, so there's
Shop
two
good,
things.
design good.
Okay, so there's two things that you've said, and I think they're powerful things. And that is, one, that there's a physical, i.e. emotional response in this world, right? A gashmadika response, physical response, which means the wife gives him the space and appreciates that's what he's in. And she understands that her relationship with him is a relationship with the Eibishter as well. And that as long as she has bitachon, emunah and bitachon, and continues to do what she should be doing, including what you pointed out, being his cheerleader. That is to say, it's not
believing in him.
Right. The partner doesn't just say, okay, I'll leave him alone, I'll let him go through his process, and allow the divorce to take place, meaning the physical, emotional separation. She's still there for him. She's still, or he for her, she's still supportive and engaging, but in a way that's not judgmental or threatening or nagging, right? And we can say that of either a zocher and a keva, a man or a woman. Because while I think the genders do it differently, we all do it. So that's one aspect. But that other aspect is really the Hasidic Inion, and that is that you absolutely have to have the bitachon.
Our Israeli guest.
We have a guest here, so my wife's just... podcast. So we have a holy guest from Shliach from Russia with us.
Wow. Is this
Of Zalman Deitch.
Online?
Okay.
Online, live.
Live. Yes. Okay. Go ahead.
So the aspect that the second aspect that my wife mentioned is this Inion of having emunah bitochon, that as long as you stay connected to the Eibishter and the process, and don't just allow yourself to separate from your spouse, but to be engaging in a positive way, then the flow from higher up, the Mela is going to flow down and actually have an effect on the other, on the spouse, the husband or the wife, whichever it may be. So it's not like you're helpless. It's not like you're not doing anything, which was the predicate of my question, right? I said, well, if you're going to leave them alone, and you're not going to be judgmental, and you're not going to nag the other for not doing what they need to do and not being engaged, and you just live your own life, then they're just as likely to continue to grow apart. But that's not what you're saying. What you're saying very clearly is that you still stay engaged, but in a very positive way. But even more important, you're engaged with the Eibishter. You absolutely know, as you said, Trakut vet Zayin, you absolutely know that as long as you're doing what you need to do with Torah, with mitzvahs, with Avos Yisrael, that's going to have an impact spiritually. So you're dealing with both the emotional and physical relationship of the couple. Don't nag, don't be judgmental, back off, but don't separate yourself. But just, or maybe more importantly, allow the flow mela. It's not a magical thing. One could say it's a mystical thing, because we're talking about transcendence and the divine flow. But we know is Sarusa de Latata brings us Sarusa de La'egla. As long as you're doing what you need to do when it comes to Torah and mitzvahs and family and Avos Yisrael, that's going to impact the flow from above.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a fascinating story that Rabbi Newman actually gave in the Dvar Torah.
Rabbi Dov Newman from Chabad of
Beverlywood. And he was saying, all comes to this celebration, whether it was because the boy Yitzchak was weaned, or whether it was his bar mitzvah, whatever it was, he was there, like, making fun of Yitzchak, and making fun that, this wimpy guy, I can shoot him down in a minute, and he was laughing and gesturing with his gang there, and Hashem actually heard this and said, what do you think? One day you will see this Yitzchak and how powerful he is. Because what was happening in that moment of that jest of making fun of the weak one was he was saying, physical might is everything. And Yitzchak represents the spiritual might. And Hashem will basically answer, you will see one day what spiritual might accomplishes. A woman can knock on the door, she can be nagging, she can do all these kind of physical things to try to shake him up, and too much of that is overbearing. Too much of that is too much netzach in the war of the victory to save her husband, and could be choking him and actually make him turn the other way and get me out of here. I don't want this naggy woman. Whereas a woman of valor has the spiritual power to be with her emunah and her bitachon, to believe in her man. I mean, Rabbi Ginsburg also mentions that the woman carries the seed of the man and develops it. So her emunah bitachon in him will help develop his potential. But usually women are needier than men. They're emotional. They feel a drive to want to be accepted and loved. They feel when they lack that nourishment from their husband, they break in a way. And their neediness causes them to do things that will cause the husband to be more capable of breaking away from them, because it's overbearing and over the top of neediness.
So there's a Hasidic explanation for that woman's neediness. And there's also a Hasidic explanation for the man's tendency to be secluded. Say, just leave me alone. I'm going to close the door. I just want to be left alone. I don't want to talk. I don't want to deal with it. And what is that? When we talk about the divine flow, transcendence, how do we know how the divine flow comes in the world? We know from Hasidus and from Kabbalah, but especially from Hasidus, divine flow comes down through Chokhmah. It comes down as an a priori, a non-existential, meaning a non-physical. It's a creative moment. Chokhmah, koach ma, right? The power of ma. If you were to describe that in regular English jargon, it would be that creative moment that just comes to you. It's the solution to an algebraic formula. It's a musician's ability to just all of a sudden hear a song in his mind's eye and then want to sit down and write it out with musical notes on paper. It's that first moment that just comes. Now, it doesn't necessarily come, not that women aren't creative and have those kind of moments, but the flow from a spiritual perspective flows through the Zachar, the male element. That's the Chokhmah. When a husband is bittul to the Eibishter, meaning self-nullified and truly an Eved of Hashem, servant of Hashem, he gets that flow. And the divine flow. If he's a Baal Gaiva, if he's all the things that he shouldn't be, he wants to be the king of his house in the physical way, but doesn't want to be bittul to the Eibishter, then the divine flow is not going to be healthy. The healthy environment is where he is bittul to the Eibishter, the flow comes through the Zachar and flows into Bina, the Nekeva. So as a transcendent or a mystical reality, a female, the wife, wants to get the flow, the divine flow that comes through him being bittul to the Eibishter from him. Because what does she do? She then takes that koach ma, that nekuda of the yud. She takes that and literally builds bina, a binyan, a house of not just the physical house of children and so forth, but we're talking about the spiritual flow. She builds this house of spiritual power. And it's a foundation with walls and protection of a ceiling. But she does that through the flow from the Zachar, from the husband, as it were.
But the problem is women want a quick fix. They want it built in a second.
Right. But their desire to have it is a natural desire.
Absolutely.
And the man, why does he want to seclude himself? He's willing to seclude because he's a nekuda. He's just that little dot. So if he's not focused on building a binyan of being productive and expanding that creative moment, meaning in the divine flow, then he's fine. I got my little nakuda. That's all I need. I'm going into my room. Leave me alone. But what we have to realize is no one is simply a Zachar or simply a Nekeva. We have parts of all of that. But more importantly, we're never an island unto ourselves. When you enter a marriage, you have a binyan between yourself, your wife, and the Eibishter, and then your children. You create a house, and that can be the same concept as part of a community. You're never simply an island unto yourself. You're part of a minyan. You're part of a kehila. You have a responsibility. So a good part of this is just realizing that the moment you find yourself having these, as it were, these times, right? These impulses would be a better word. These impulses to demand of your spouse that which you're not getting. I think that the medicine that my wife is proposing is the right one. And it's a balance between understanding you've got to give them their space and not be judgmental, but that doesn't mean to separate from them. It means to be productively engaging gently engaging, but most importantly realizing that as long as you are in touch with that divine flow, you can repair. So the Bina, the house, can repair the Chokhmah, even though it's a reverse flow. Why? Because the woman also has Zachar. She also has that ability to draw down Chokhmah. So if she has to draw it down for a husband in the meantime, while he is able to repair himself or not, but that repair will come Mela Milo. It will come from the Eibishter.
Absolutely has. And I just recently was learning one of the Hayom Yom, I think it was, and it says that a woman is an unfinished vessel. And actually it was the Haftorah, sorry, the Haftorah, where it talked about the relationship between God and the Jewish people. And just like a woman is an unfinished product and she needs her other half, and by being married she becomes a finished product. You can make a joke about that, but the idea is that God and the Jewish people have a relationship in which we're an unfinished vessel, and we need God to help us become a finished vessel. And the key ingredient in the way by which we're a fitting vessel for God's flow and His light and His brachas to help create this finished product called the best me, I need to make space for that flow. But if there's an arrogance and a demanding and expectations, and it's all about I want, and I don't get, and my needs are met, and I, then you're so full of yourself that there's no room for God to have any place in you to fill you up and make you into the somebody that He's waiting for you to become. So the same thing in love and relationship. If you're so full of yourself and you're so into what your needs are and aren't being met, as the pasuk says that the Jewish people, when their daschem, when their das is ketzarim, when it's like their wisdom is so scant, it's so puny, it's so, another word for moichin dekatlus, it's a small-mindedness. It's all about me, I, and not seeing the bigger picture of this wholesome relationship that we could be working on to better each other. Then you're constantly having expectations that aren't being met, and then you're constantly sad, mad, anxious, annoyed, and all the rest of those negative words.
So you really,
But
yeah.
a person who has broad-mindedness, that has opened his mind to the truth of what this relationship is about and what's expected, what's the human condition, what all the more knowledge, the Gemara says, and a person that em habanim smecha, the mother of Bina, as it were. Usually it's the mother of children. She's so happy, but the mother of Bina is so happy, and she's doesn't expect anything. She's just so grateful. I have a roof over my head. I don't have to work like a dog because I have someone else helping with the bills. I have the freedom, to raise my children, or all these different things. She's just grateful all the time, and she's happy. And like God is our shadow. When we're happy, He's happy. When He sees people getting along, then He wants to bless them even more. These are the spiritual bonuses that keep flowing into our life when we have that mindset we're doing a paradigm shift. That it's not about me and what I want and my needs. It's like, what am I here for? In Ashtag, the book, it says, your main mission is to be godlike. Well, what's the main mission of being more godlike? He loves giving. So we have to take that and reverse the pleasure-seeking personality of what's in it for me, and the pleasure of receiving, and turn that to the pleasure of giving. And if you look at the Torah and all the spheres, there's no word for really ahava in the 10 spheres of the building blocks of the world. What is it? Chesed. Chesed is one of the building blocks of this world, not love. By doing acts of kindness, by having the pleasure in giving, which if you look at the word ahava, comes from the word have, to give. You give, you get love. You don't wait, give me, and then I'll love you. Because that's what's happening. Everyone's waiting for the other to, and wants the pleasure of receiving instead of just blatantly, unconditionally, I'm here to give. That's why I left Kisak Kavod up in Shemayim. I'm here to be a limb of God, to take pleasure in giving.
So there's I'll weave, because my participation is going to have to come to a close here, but I'll weave on what I think you've just given is very good practical advice, and we can connect it again to Hasidus, and that is, what is the ultimate purpose of the Jew in this world? What is the ultimate purpose that Rebbe tells us? Hashem Yisborah mis'ave dira b'tachtonim. The Eibishter desires a dwelling place in this world. And the Lashon is lasot dira b'tachtonim, that we should make a dwelling place for the Eibishter. So the Eibishter creates a world in which He's the omnipotent, omniscient one. He doesn't literally need anything for us in His essence, but He created a world in which we are essential. And what is that essential? To give, to do for the Eibishter. Lasot dira b'tachtonim, to make a dwelling place in this lowly world of holiness for the Eibishter.
To develop ourselves.
So
it's one of the key reasons.
Right. So, and that's why also when people would write to the Rebbe and they would be suffering depression or this issue or that issue, 9 times out of 10, especially when it came to depression, the Rebbe would advise, go out and find someone worse off than you. Go out and find someone, because there always will be. Go out and find someone worse and help them. Do for them. And there's a trigger there that the Rebbe was pointing to and teaches us. And that's this point that you're making. When it's no longer about you and your depression or your problems, and all of a sudden it's about giving, lasot dira b'tachtonim, to the Eibishter and to others, the flow and the change will take place that comes from on high.
And the Rebbe actually said, Matan Torah, it's the giving of the Torah. Because we're supposed to give it over. We're supposed to be a light unto the nations. We should show the example of loyalty, of human decency, of compassion, of understanding, and oh my gosh, these are the things that please God. It starts in our home.
Well,
that was amazing.
It's a good start, good restart.
Yes. Thank you for joining, and hopefully we'll see you next week, Wednesdays, same
5:30 Pacific time.
And it's just, did you look in the bag what I gave you?
I did.
See what the
fruit and a
snack.
bottle of water.
A snack, like the story.
I got that.
Okay, upgrade in your appreciation, upgrade in your giving. Do a little more even of the small things and show your appreciation. Please God.
Amen.
All right, bye-bye. Thank you for joining. Wow. I'll see if there's any questions, and I'm glad you're here. So I'm going to be leaving in a minute, but if there's any questions, just a couple of minutes, any words you want to share before we go? I see here. Thank you for joining. All right. Beautiful week. Bye-bye. Let's keep praying. Our acts of little kindness here and a little more kindness there may bombard the heavens above and rain down victory. And the victory within yourself will help the victory of your home and help bring the victory to our people.